Tonight, we won't argue about belief. We won't do real versus not real. We're going to ask a stranger question. Why can astral projection feel more real than real? Why can it stick in your memory like an event, not like a dream? If you've ever felt it, you already know the difference. A normal dream fades, but this feels sharp, stamped, like your brain pressed a seal that says, "This happened." And here's the first important thing. Most people who describe this aren't lying. They're describing something their brain actually produced, with enough intensity to feel undeniable. So let's build a quiet map, not of the universe, but of the mechanism, the simple, everyday system that normally makes you feel located in your body, right now. Because astral projection starts with one invisible question your brain answers every second. Where am I? You don't notice it, because it usually works perfectly, but it's always running. Even with your eyes closed. You know where your head is. You know where your shoulders are. You know where your hands are. You know where the bed touches your skin. That knowledge doesn't come from one sense. It's a blend, a merge, a stitched-together picture. Your brain builds a body map, and that map is what makes me feel like here. Now, keep that in mind, because the most shocking part about a body experiences is not the leaving, it's the map shifting. When people say, "I was above myself," what they're really describing is a change in self-location, a change in where the brain places the point called me. And the brain can move that point without moving your body. It sounds impossible until you remember something. Your brain already creates full worlds while your body lies still, every night, in dreams. So the real mystery is this. Why does the brain sometimes create a world and also switch on the feeling of certainty, the feeling of this is real? That's the difference between a dream you forget and an experience you can't shake. Now I'm going to tell you something that will explain a lot. Most out-of-body experiences happen near a doorway. Not a doorway in space, a doorway in state. The edge of sleep, the edge of waking. The thin border where the brain changes modes. And when the brain changes modes, sometimes two modes overlap, just for a moment. One mode generates imagery, like a dream. The other mode stamps reality, like waking life. If they overlap, you get something rare, a dream that feels awake, a vision that feels physical, a scene that feels like a memory from the real world. And that is why the experience can feel so convincing. Because the brain's "this is real" stamp is on. Now, there's a detail that appears again and again in people's stories. The ceiling, the floating, the rising, the camera angle from above. Why above? Why not to the side? Why not behind the door? Why is it so often the ceiling? Here's where it gets quietly scientific. Inside your inner ear, you have a balance system, a motion system, a system that tells your brain you're moving, you're turning, you're falling, you're rising. Most of the time it's accurate, but at the sleep doorway, it can become noisy, glitchy, a little confused. And you already know a small version of this. Have you ever been drifting into sleep and suddenly felt like you were falling and your body jolted like it had to catch itself? That jolt is common. It's your brain reacting to a motion signal that doesn't match the body. Now imagine a stronger version. Instead of falling, it feels like rising. Instead of a jolt, it becomes a story, a scene, a perspective. The brain receives a sensation of movement, and it does what brains always do. It explains it. It turns sensation into meaning. So if the sensation is up, the easiest explanation is, I'm going up. And if I is going up, then my body must be below. That's how the ceiling enters the story, not as a spiritual choice, but as a simple way to make the sensation fit. Now we have two pieces: a doorway state where dream imagery can mix with waking certainty, and a motion system that can suggest rising, floating, separating. But there's still one more piece, the one that makes people whisper, "But I saw details. I noticed things. I knew something I shouldn't have known." So let's talk about what seeing really is, because this will surprise you. Seeing is not a camera. Seeing is construction. Your eyes give data, but your brain builds the picture. And it builds it using memory, expectation, tiny sensory cues, and a constant stream of prediction. This is why you can picture your kitchen right now, even without standing in it. You can walk through it in your mind. You can place the table, the chair, the light. Your brain holds models of spaces, and under certain conditions, those models can become vivid, almost visual. In an out-of-body experience, the brain may combine a room model, a motion sensation, and a dreamlike image generator. Then it adds one final ingredient: attention. Because when people have this experience, they are usually highly alert. Even if their body can't move, their mind is awake, scanning, trying to understand, trying to survive. And high alert does something specific. It makes memories sharper. It makes details feel important. It makes the story feel significant. So the person remembers the angle of the door, the shadow on the wall, the shape of the blanket. And here's the dangerous part. After the experience, the brain keeps editing. Because memory is not a recording. Memory is a reconstruction. Every time you remember, you rebuild. And the rebuild can become more confident, more coherent, more obviously true. That's why someone can become more certain over time, not less. Because the story solidifies. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what about the moments where people seem to notice something real? Something that actually was there? Here is the simplest explanation, and it's more powerful than it sounds. Your brain is constantly collecting small cues without you noticing. A tiny sound, a light that leaks through a curtain, a familiar creak in the floor, a memory of where things usually are. When the brain creates a scene, it uses those cues, and sometimes it lands on something accurate. Not because it had supernatural access, but because it had normal information stitched together brilliantly. And when it lands on something accurate, that becomes the anchor, the proof in the mind, the moment that makes everything else feel confirmed. Now, there's one more twist, and this is the part that makes the experience feel intimate, personal, almost sacred. During these doorway states, the boundary of self can loosen. The sense of body ownership can soften, and the brain can momentarily treat the body like an object in the room. That is an eerie sentence, but it explains the feeling of, I'm here, and my body is there. And once that boundary loosens, it can produce two opposite emotions. For some people, it's peaceful, because the brain interprets separation as relief, a release from tension, a quiet distance. For others, it's terrifying, because the brain interprets separation as danger, loss of control. I can't move. I can't get back. Same mechanism, different meaning. And meaning changes everything. Because meaning decides whether your nervous system goes up into panic or down into calm. Now, I want you to notice what we've built so far. We haven't needed magic to explain why it feels real. We used 3 everyday systems: a self-location map, a balance and motion system, and a doorway state where dream imagery can mix with waking certainty. That alone can create floating, ceiling perspective, a sense of separation, and a memory that feels like an event. But there's still a reason this topic never dies. Because even if you accept the mechanism, you still feel the experience. And feelings don't argue. They convince. So here's the promise of part 2. In the next part, we'll go deeper into the moment the map shifts. We'll talk about the brain's body model, like a living GPS, and how one tiny mismatch can make the entire self relocate. Then we'll answer the scariest question people ask. Why does it sometimes happen again and again? Why does the brain learn the doorway and return to it? And finally, we'll talk about what to do if it happens to you, so you don't panic, so you don't spiral, so you understand what your brain is doing while it's doing it. Because once you understand the mechanism, the fear loses fuel and curiosity takes over. Part 2 is where it gets even stranger. Part 2 begins with a detail most people miss. In the stories, the leaving isn't the strangest part. The strangest part is how clean the shift feels. One moment, me is inside the body. Next moment, me is somewhere else. So in this part, we're going to do 2 things. First, we'll explain how your brain builds a self-GPS, a live system that constantly places you inside your body. And second, we'll answer the question that makes this topic addictive. Why does it sometimes repeat? Why do some people get it once, and others keep falling into it like a doorway they can't stop finding? Let's start with the self-GPS, because once you understand it, the ceiling perspective stops feeling supernatural and starts feeling eerily logical. Your brain doesn't just have a body map. It has a body map that updates every second. Like a navigation app, it blends signals, touch, pressure, muscle position, balance, and vision. And then it creates one single output, a simple feeling. I am here. That feeling is so basic, so constant, that we never question it until the night it shifts. Now, here's the key idea. Your brain doesn't locate you in your body because it's true. It locates you in your body because it's useful. It's a solution, a stable guess, a model that helps you survive. So when the input signals become unstable, the model can change. Not because reality changed, but because the brain's best guess changed. Think of it like this. If you're in a car and GPS loses signal, the map can jump. The arrow can suddenly appear one street away, even though the car never moved. Out-of-body experiences can be like that. Not a soul traveling, but a pointer jumping. The me pointer. So what makes the signal unstable? What makes the pointer jump? There are 3 common triggers, and the first one is the most important. Sleep state overlap. When you're falling asleep, your brain starts turning down the body. It reduces movement commands. It changes sensory weighting. It begins to lock the muscles so you don't act out your dreams. But sometimes you keep awareness. Your mind stays lit while the body is being dimmed. That mismatch is not neutral. It's a shock to the system because the brain says, I'm awake, but I can't move. And once you can't move, your body signals change. Touch becomes weird. Breathing becomes loud. Heartbeat becomes a drum. The room feels close. Then the brain does something it always does in uncertainty. It turns up monitoring. It scans. It tries to find a reason. And this is where the experience becomes cinematic. Because when the brain can't find enough data, it fills in the missing pieces. Now the second trigger, the balance system, the inner ear. When you're lying still and the brain is drifting, the balance system can send ambiguous signals, tiny sensations of rotation, float, lift. Usually the brain ignores them, but in a high-alert doorway state, It doesn't ignore them. It uses them. It writes them into the story. And once the story contains movement, the story needs a camera angle, a perspective. So the brain places the me pointer above, because that matches rising. That's why so many people describe the same geometry, up, above, looking down. Not because everyone visited the same place, but because many brains use the same simple solution. Now the third trigger is the one that makes repeats more likely. Expectation. This is subtle, but powerful. If you've had the experience once, your brain learns a new possibility. It learns, this can happen. And once your brain knows it can happen, it starts scanning for it, even without your permission. You go to bed, and a part of you wonders, will it happen again? That wonder is not harmless, because attention changes thresholds. Attention changes how you enter sleep. Attention keeps the mind slightly awake. And that creates the doorway state again, the overlap, the mismatch. So the experience can become self-reinforcing, not as magic, as learning. Now, there's a moment in many out-of-body stories that feels terrifying. The moment where the person tries to move and can't. They try to scream and nothing comes out. They try to sit up and the body doesn't respond. And then the mind creates the worst question. What if I'm stuck? What if I can't go back? Here is the truth that calms that fear. In most cases, your body is not gone. It is protected. It is in a temporary lock, a sleep-related lock. Your brain is doing the same thing it does every night, preventing movement while the dream system is active. But when your awareness is on, the lock feels like a trap. And traps make the brain create a second layer, a presence, a watcher, a threat. Because in evolution, immobility is dangerous, so the mind searches for the predator, even if the predator is only a shape, even if the predator is only a feeling. This is why out-of-body experiences and sleep paralysis often sit next to each other. They share doorway states. They share body lock sensations. They share high alert monitoring. Now, let's address something gently. Some people describe this experience as peaceful. Some describe it as the scariest moment of their life. Why? Because the brain doesn't just build perception, it builds interpretation. If your nervous system reads the moment as safe, separation can feel like release, like floating, like silence. If your nervous system reads the moment as danger, separation can feel like loss, like you're being pulled, like you're trapped. Same mechanism, different story. Now we come to the repeating question again. Why does it keep happening to some people? Here are the most common repeat factors. Irregular sleep schedule, waking up and falling back asleep quickly, sleeping on your back, high stress, and practicing techniques that keep the mind awake while the body sleeps. That last one matters, because many astral projection methods are basically training the doorway, keeping awareness on, while the body enters sleep paralysis. So yes, some people can increase the chance of the experience, not because they opened a portal, but because they learned the overlap state. Now, before we end part 2, I want to give you a simple thought experiment. It will make the whole thing click. Imagine you're wearing a VR headset. You turn your head, and the world turns. You feel located inside the avatar. But if the tracking glitches, if the world shifts slightly, you can suddenly feel unanchored, like you moved, even if you didn't. Your body is not VR, but the brain's self-location system is a kind of internal VR, a model, a best guess, a stable illusion that normally helps you live. And when the model glitches, the illusion becomes visible. And that visibility feels like mystery. Now the promise of part 3. In the final part, we'll answer the most practical question. What should you do in the moment? if it happens, how do you keep it from turning into panic? How do you ground yourself? And what does science suggest about reducing repeats? Without fear, without superstition. Just calm control. And there's one last twist I saved for part 3. The reason some people feel like they saw themselves from outside, and why that specific camera angle is one of the brain's favorite tricks. Part 3 is where it becomes useful, not just fascinating. If it happens, here's what to do. Because curiosity is powerful, but what most people want is simple. How do I stay calm in the moment so I don't panic, so I don't spiral? First, don't fight it. The instinct is to test reality, to sit up, to force your arm to move, to prove control. But effort is fuel. Effort raises arousal, and arousal keeps the doorway state open. So the first goal is not to escape. The first goal is to lower the system. Say one sentence in your head, slowly. This is a brain state. This will pass. Now anchor to one tiny physical cue. The easiest cue is breathing, not forcing it, just noticing it. Air in, air out. If breathing feels tight, that's common. In this overlap state, the chest can feel heavy, so don't argue with it. Observe it. Slow, neutral. If you can, keep your eyes soft or keep them closed, because in this state, the brain can paint threat shapes into shadows. That isn't magic. It's high alert perception. Now, use a micro movement, not a full movement. People try to move the whole body and panic when it fails. Instead, aim for the smallest signal, a toe, a fingertip, the tip of your tongue against your teeth. Micro movements often reconnect faster because they don't spike panic. They gently bring the body online. Swallowing can help too, or slowly pressing your tongue to the roof of your mouth. Small signals, calm signals. And if you're not scared, if you're curious, the same rule still applies. Stay soft, stay slow. Don't chase, don't force. Forcing collapses the state into panic or full waking. After it ends, don't rush to label it. Your brain will want a story, a final explanation. But right after an intense state, interpretation becomes extreme, so delay it. Write neutral notes instead. What time? What you felt? What position you slept in? Stress level that day? Caffeine. Then ground yourself in normal sensory reality. Light, water, a small snack, a short walk, or simply feeling the floor under your feet. Send one message to your brain. We are safe. We are here. We are in the body. If you can't fall back asleep, don't lie there monitoring. Monitoring trains the doorway. Get up for a few minutes. Dim light, calm activity, then return. To reduce repeats over time, stabilize inputs. Consistent sleep timing. Less sleep fragmentation. And if you notice a pattern, experiment gently with position. Back sleeping can increase overlap for some people. Side sleeping sometimes helps. Late caffeine and heavy stress don't cause it, but they sharpen the nervous system. And sharpened systems stamp experiences as intense, so the doorway becomes easier to enter. Now the most important factor, attention. If you fear it, you scan for it. If you chase it, you scan for it. Either way, scanning keeps the mind awake while the body sleeps. So the goal is not stop thinking, it's stop monitoring. Replace monitoring with a neutral focus, a slow audiobook, a calm mental image, a gentle counting rhythm, something that holds attention without tension. One last twist. Why the viewpoint is so often above. Because at the doorway, self-location and viewpoint can uncouple. The brain has to pick a stable place to put the camera. and the easiest stable place is above. Above matches floating sensations. Above gives a clean, full room model. Above reduces noisy body signals. So the brain chooses it as a convenient solution. You don't have to decide what it means to understand why it happens, and understanding is power. Because once your brain realizes this is a state, not a threat, fear loses oxygen. If it happens again, remember 3 keys: soft meaning, breath anchor, micro movement. Then let it pass, or let it unfold, without panic, just with quiet clarity.